Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 11. We've already done 11 of these, 11 weeks in a row. That's pretty crazy. I gotta figure out what's gonna happen when I'm like on a vacation or out at SIGGRAPH. I don't know. It's not like we have to do every single week. And I haven't even decided if we're going to be doing, I mean, we are saying season one, but how long is the season? How long is the break between them? I don't know. We'll figure it out. And the idea being is when it's around the time of half-res, it's good for me to be able to focus on that kind of stuff or even work on some other projects that require more attention because this eats up a lot of Wednesday. But in any case, we've already got the chat up. In fact, I clicked on the wrong window here for my introduction, so whatever. So let's go ahead and take a look at the chat. Already, we got some links coming in. Thanks so much, everybody, for putting it up. Darkbane is got a question about XP dynamics. I thought it just said dynamics. I am not an expert in any form on the XP dynamics. I don't even know if I've really tinkered with it very much. So let's take a look at this link and see if we can figure something out. So let's see. What is the very? I'm gonna share the screen. What is the very specific question? I can't get the splines and tendrils to wrap around each other like demonstrated. Okay. Yeah, so this is Bob had put this together, and he's got some nice tendrils wrapping around and tinkering. I mean, he's got the entire setup right here. Does he walk? Well, it's early access update, so he probably doesn't break it down step by step. But our first step here, if I was doing this, was let's just go head over to Insidium, and let's see if we can find this project on the content repository. So let's go ahead and click on that. And let's see if the tendrils are here. Tendrils? Search. Doesn't look like it, although that might not be the word to look for. Let's say dynamics, actually. Do they say dynamics yet? Nope. They also say splines, but let's just say dynamics. No, nothing there yet. Okay, so it would be tinkering around with that, but I'm a little concerned where I would essentially probably mostly just be going through here and trying to figure out what they did. And then they do have the thickness traveling down. So, I mean, we can try and figure it out from scratch. I'm cool spending a couple minutes doing that. So I've got that new version of Xparticles installed. It looks like they were already cloning onto a spline. I'm not 100% sure, but let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to make this be 50 points long. Let's do the radius of 0 and 0 on our helix, as well as an angle of 0. And let's change the orientation to be pointing up on Y. So we've got that spline going. Should be able to make that editable. Or actually, well, it seemed like theirs was editable. I make a copy, make it editable. And let's right away see if we can go to Xparticle tags. And there is an XP Dynamics tag that we can apply directly to it. Distribution is based on the vertices, which seems correct. And it's got a group, that's fine. It's got the emitter. Let's add an emitter. And I think if we hit play, we should automatically see points get created. Let's go ahead and change our visibility to display. Let's go and change the dots to circle filled. That should be pretty easy to see. There we go, nice and big. And yeah, that seems good. Now, what do we got? What other settings we got? We got a radius, but look, this twirls down, which is cool. Although it wants to be fed a map, so I don't think that actually helps us there. Mass, velocity, set initial. Constraint, structure constraint. Yeah, there's a lot of variables here that I am just not super familiar with. The main one being is how do we lock a particular point? Set initial, we don't want to do that. Trigger immediately, that's fine. I mean, the first thing I'm curious about is let's just see if this works overall. I'm going to go ahead and put a sphere here. Let's go ahead and add a Xparticle collider, and let's just hit play. Okay, well, nothing happens, but we do have a speed of 0 probably. Well, the emitter got created, and let's see, the emission has a speed of 0. So let's go ahead and add in a gravity. So let's go Xparticles. I probably should start using the whole XP system. That's not the way my brain works. Motion, gravity, play. Okay, cool. It fell and it's sitting up there, so it started doing something immediately. Let's put that off the side just a little bit so it's not going to hit a perfectly flat thing. And boing, boing, boing. Okay, so that's working. Now, right now it's really rigid, so we've probably got some, yeah, we've got rigidity here. So let's just drop that to 0 and see what that does. Okay, cool. Now they're completely independent. Let's give it, I don't know, 11. Let's see if it kind of maintains a structure. Well, oh, wow, that's quite a bit. So I think we want to go to constraints, and we're going to say something like structure constraint. And now they're all, yeah, so you see they are more connected, where they're not just independent particles. There's a structure to it. And I wonder if we would want to add in, there's shape constraints. I don't know much about, I'm not sure what a shape constraint is. Yeah, I thought maybe a shape constraint is kind of like the flexion in a normal soft body simulation, which is trying to maintain the angle between them. And it seems a little twitchy there, but if we, let's go ahead and put a low number. And yeah, you can see it's bendy, but it's kind of maintaining its shape a little bit more. So maybe that structure, I am curious if we add a little bit of rigidity to it. Does it completely override? Is this kind of a rigidity? Yeah, you see how it suddenly, like, it compressed and it suddenly shot out? So I bet you that rigidity is more like, what do you call it? Stiffness inside of soft body dynamics is my guess. Not 100% sure, but that could be the case. Now, I mean, we're just learning this together, but until we hit a significant dead end, we can keep on tinkering a little bit. What I'd love to do is figure out how to lock it down. And that is the trick. And then we got to figure out how to change the radius as well, but we'll figure that out when we get there. So there is no set initial, well, there's set initial for the initial position, but that is not what I think we want. So I think it goes more to, we need to create some sort of like question or some sort of lock where something becomes locked in at a certain point. There might be a fancy way to do this, but let's just go ahead and try and do it with a question. I'm going to say, here's a question, and yeah, so I'm going to add a question in, and I'm going to say if the age, not the age, I don't care about the age, I care about the particle's position. So that position is probably, oh, particle position is a direct thing. I just want a absolute particle position, so there's a particle position. And we can say if it is in world space on the y-axis greater than some number, and I don't know what that number is, so let's just make a plane. I'm going to move this up until, kind of difficult to see. Dang it. Okay, scoot out the side there. And I just want to move this up until it's just kind of barely below where one of the points is going to be made. And that height globally is 100 and just below 200. So let's go ahead to our, back to our XP. Oh, here's our question here. I'm going to say that the distance, well, let's see, it's if, so this is true if on the world position on the y-axis it's greater than that number. Cool. What is the action? The action is I want that particle to, I think, freeze. Or is it stick? Not unstick. I want it to freeze. So let's do a direct action and freeze the particle. Cool. So let's see if that works. Boop. Yes and no. Interesting. Very interesting. Not necessarily wrong. Now this could go to the shape constraints. We might need to turn that back on, and in a big way. Whoa, funky. Yeah, that connects it, but it is not, that is not smooth. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just look at the still frame here, and oh, look, they've got its second tag on there, so maybe there's some sort of constraint tag. XP pin. That sounds like something. So I'm going to turn off that question and freeze, and we've got a pin. There's a pin map. I'm going to go at, that seems questionable. the object, I'm going to assume that because it's on the object, it knows what it is. And then does it want to connect to a particular object is my next thought. So I'm going to make a null and hit Shift C, which should turn on snapping. And I should be able to move this point up in the air. And you're going to see it snap right there. So that could be where we're pinning to. So that is now the object I want to pin to. And we want a pin map. And I don't know for sure, but what I'm going to do is select that one point and let's set a selection tag. And let's pin that. It did accept it. So now that that is pinned, nothing's freezing. Let's go ahead and hit play. Well, we did turn off the question and everything. So this is pinning. That did successfully pin. But you can see immediately that is stretching super far away. That makes me think that we need to do something more under some of these other settings. But what that might be, I don't know. Mass, damping, offset. Well, it's, yeah, the rigidity, like a rigidity I think would sort of keep it there. But like I said, I think rigidity is like structure. You can see how it doesn't have a nice curvature to it. So I think the rigidity is really a brute force thing. That's something we want to do if we had a cube, and the cube is supposed to maintain the shape of a cube. So that's not what we want in this case. So the pin does work, although it does seem to do a very similar thing to what we did manually, but it's cool that we got that working. So once again, not sure what the next step would be, so let's take a quick look at his hierarchy here. I'm assuming those are getting connected to something. He does have a spline mesh, turbulence, gravity, dynamics. He seems to have something under dynamics. I wonder if we can see that. I'm going to jump backward in time. Nope, doesn't really show it there. There's something secret under dynamics, and I don't know what it is. So what could we add in dynamically that would maintain a chain here? Dynamics, constraint, domain, fluid, wave. I mean, my assumption would be some sort of constraint. But I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be just a lot of guessing, checking, and that is not. Somebody's saying maybe there's a mode for splines. I'm not sure what you mean by a mode for splines. In what context? He could be using domain. He could be using XP collisions. The spawn and collision, connect on collision. Are they already connected? I don't know. And we also don't have the radius set. And I didn't see any way to set the radius except for feeding it a map. There's a radius and we can feed it a map. But what is a map? You can't make a vertex tag on a spline. I don't think. It would be cool if you could. There's a lot of reasons to do that these days. It should be something we suggest to, I mean, that did apply, but I don't think it actually does anything. If we select all those and then say set vertex weight and set it to 100, I don't think there's any data there. Like, we don't see anything, that's for sure. I'm going to try applying that into this and see if it does anything. I don't expect it to. No, sadly no. Like, all the radii are identical. Too bad. So I don't know how we would feed a map into there. Although maybe there's another. Well, he only has those two tags. And so, but let's go and take a look at the XP list here. XP claw, pin tail. Yeah, I'm kind of at the end of, like, we got surprisingly far. I'm happy with how far we got. But we've now hit the limit of the information I can extract from here, and I don't think Bob is hanging out with us today. He hangs out on Thursday sometimes. Is there a distance constraint? I mean, somebody's saying let's go easy on the gravity, but at a certain point, these things get locked in or they don't, because all the cumulative weight on all of these is what's affecting us. So we would want this situation to exist under really high gravity as well. So if that's a limitation, then that would already be disappointing. And I don't think that that is the problem. Weighted mass. I don't know. Tricky one. Oh, an XP constraints allows you to maintain distance between them. Okay, let's try that. Thanks. Thanks. Let's give that a try. So let's try that again. XP constraints. Distance, connect within distance. I mean, I don't want to connect within distance. Well, let's say connect within distance with 0 stiffness. Doesn't need stiffness. Doesn't really seem to. Connection limit 3. Actually, it only have to be 2 connections at birth. Oh, wait, that just connects them if they are within a distance. We can say connect at birth. Forces, viscosity, surface tension. I mean, you're saying, somebody's saying you can maintain particle distances to each other with XP constraints. I mean, I know we can push them away. Minimum distance, maximum, 2 connections. Radius does not need to be much. They're pretty close together. Let's say 10. Absolute radius. No. Nope, 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 nope. Nope, 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 nope. If it's not under here, and we got custom connection limit 2, because we just want it to connect from, like, each one to connect to one above it and one below it. Give it a tiny radius, expansion, compression, break. Yeah, sorry everybody, I'm not seeing the specific things. So if anybody else ends up tinkering around with it and figures out exactly what is causing it, then we can jump back into it. But for now, let's go ahead and just lock this one up, and you can go ahead and post in extra questions or your question again. Scene files for episode 11. XP tendrils? I guess we should put it. Tinkering. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, we got, like I said, we got pretty far, considering I've literally never tinkered with that at all, so that's cool. I know, okay, so WS Meeks has a link to something Merc made, and I know without even looking at it what your question is going to be. And I'll pull it up because it's really cool, and if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. I'm assuming that, yes, it's this painting wrinkles. Now, here's the thing, is he does this stuff behind his Patreon wall, and I don't want to try and figure out what he did for a technique that he's trying to put out there in the world and to get people to help follow him and support him. So I'm not going to take somebody else's tutorial and remake it from a tutorial. We have to see an end result type of thing and be like, okay, well, how was that made? But I did want to point out that if you want to go figure out, then you can go ahead and support him on Patreon, and he'll show you exactly what the technique is. So, but yeah, really nifty technique there. Oh boy, how would you model and animate something like this? Around 26 seconds in. Let's see what we got here. Keep the volume way down. Well, first of all, this was made by Mickey Nemchek. Nikki Nemchek. Ooh, creepy and organic. Do you know what's cool about that? At least this material. It looks like, you know, when you have a really old balloon, like you have like a party balloon, and the latex was really inflated for a really long time, and then it's gotten really old and it gets all wrinkly and rubbery. That's exactly what that looks like, which is really cool. That's not what you're specifically asking about. You're asking about 26 seconds in, which is similar. Okay, so it's all kind of okay, same idea. So it's kind of, any of this could be referenced. Well, first of all, it's a short exploration of colors and shapes, inspired by macro nature. So no specific. Well, here's a Behance link to what they made, and usually people do a little bit more of a breakdown in that kind of thing. Oh, but not in this case. It's just the final imagery. So as far as how they went and did it, I'm assuming that it's Houdini, rendered in Octane. No hints in the comments. Let's check his website, but again, I'm going to imagine that it's just the imagery. See, because there's a lot of different approaches, and I'd be curious about the specific one that they took, but unfortunately, no additional information. Unless that's this current one. No, I thought maybe that was a making of, but it's just this one. Okay, so the worry comes in that if you look at some of the stuff that makes this most interesting is these tiny, tiny micro wrinkles, and there's no way we can run simulations that are going to create. There's no way that we're going to be able to recreate this using pure dynamics because the effect is just too detailed. We'd never finish a simulation. So then it goes to, is there any way we could map this? But then the problem goes to, and it's something I would absolutely love to be able to do, but is there any way of getting like mesh flow from vertex maps and that type of thing? And I just don't think there's any way to do that. Getting the basics of this kind of stuff inflating is not the basics of this inflating, and we can talk about that, and then we can see if we can explore things further. But the basics of that are simple, but what makes that one unique is that interesting stretching going on. So you can see why I'm kind of focused on it. But I'm just going to start out by making a sphere here. Let's go ahead and make it double scale. I'm going to add a bunch of segments. We'll probably need more than that. But if we do that and we make a displacer and we feed the displacer inside of it, and let's have it be just a positive displacement. And I'm going to make it be a lot. So I'm going to displace by 100. Let's go ahead and make a noise. We'll feed in a nice big noise in here. And let's make it something like Naki. Naki always treats us right. Let's go ahead and shrink that up and make our global scale way bigger. And there we go. We start getting these little ballooning areas out. We can start cutting back on the octaves if we want them to be a little cleaner without all the different layers of detail. So by dropping a Naki down to 1, you see we're getting these really nice kind of even lumps going. So if we were to animate this, put an animation speed on here and hit play, you're going to see we're going to get these lumps just kind of moving around and being all lumpy. That by itself isn't terribly interesting, but technique I've talked about for a long time is if you take that exact same displacer and put it into the hierarchy a second time, then the second displacement is doing the same thing as the first, but this one's going to push it outward instead of, it's going to push it outward based on the normals that it's intersecting. And what this translates to is it's going to give this much more inflating look. So you see we get this really nice ballooning inflating thing where there's curvature outward instead of just up. And that kind of stuff is really fun. So we might need to tweak the amount these are applied. So if we take this first one and chill it out a little bit, but take the second one and make that one go out further, then I think, yeah, we can start getting a little bit better inflation. The first one doesn't have to push out nearly as much to get that little first bump out. And the further it pushes out, the more the mapping breaks it. But having said that, we're feeding it a three-dimensional noise. If we were to feed this, I'm going to go back to one displacer. If inside of the noise, we change this to be a two-dimensional noise, then we're going to get a very different layout. The scale completely changes too. So I'm going to drop that scale back down to 100, and now you can see it's very different. But now it's a two-dimensional noise. They have a big 3D cloud, so it's kind of getting mapped on there. And that might mess us up on some of our edges. In fact, for sure it is. But by doing it that way, when we add a second displacer, it has the same mapping, and we're going to get better secondary inflation from that. So just another kind of thing to keep in mind. But I do want to have the second one inflate more than the first. So you get these really nice double inflating type of looks. And then once I had that, I would definitely take a subdivision surface and drop it inside there. That might be too many subdivisions. Even just giving it one should go a long way. So now if we kind of look at that, finally get these really great, like organic looking bulges coming out for the entire surface. Keep in mind, though, that your poly count is going to dramatically drop when it comes to the edges here, because those are getting stretched way out. So, like, our polygon scale here is huge, where it's really tiny down there. So, yeah, just kind of talk about some of those limitations. But once again, this is all well and good, but it's not getting us any new information that I haven't talked about before. So how could we possibly get those stretched out wrinkles? Unless they already exist, but if that's not dynamic and interactively made, that's no fun. And these definitely feel like they're getting created on the fly. In fact, there's a couple little frames that I saw that oh my goodness, yeah. Like there's so much, like right here, that's specifically what I was looking for. You see how these are, it almost feels like there's some additional, oh man, there's no like field flow on the surface. We can get compression and stretching via the stretch tag, or I forget what it's called, the tension tag. But that does not give us this kind of orientation at all. It doesn't give us direction. So how would you arbitrarily stretch in different directions? Honestly, I don't think you can. I don't think in Cinema 4D I don't think there's any way of getting that information. Like if we had any way of pulling in information that we could start exploring different paths, but the idea that this wrinkle is stretching that way and this one's stretching up and that one's stretching across, those are different orientations for it. These wrinkles are traveling, but then you see this random one stretch over here because that's the stretching point there. So these are like some sort of more complex stretch map that gives us information on the orientation things traveled. I was thinking if you trace the vertices with a tracer, but then that always leaves a trail behind, and it's not perpetually stuck onto the surface, because if a particle traveled in and out, that would possibly do something, but I don't think that gives us anything. Although I'm curious, well, let's turn that off. I'm going to make this way lower poly for a second. I don't think this will work at all, but this won't work. I am curious though how the tracer will respond to the action. So what I'm going to do is feed this in the tracer. We're tracing every point on the tracer. So you can see that these lines get pushed out. Now what I would be inclined to do is make this be limited from the end. Set to 11. I'm sure I did that backwards because I always... Oh wow, I actually guessed it right that time. I almost always guess that wrong. Okay, so now the thought is like, okay, if we're doing this kind of tracing, then we can see when a polygon travels out or in. So we'd have to then do a shrink wrap, and that's the part where I think, no, there's no way that's going to work. Shrink wrap. So can we even shrink wrap a spline? Along normals, target object is the circle. I don't even know if you can do that with a spline. Doesn't look like you can. I'm not super familiar with the shrink wrap. Let's see. Yeah, see, it doesn't even work with a regular spline, so that doesn't work. That's too bad. We can't make splines dynamic that way. Some people are saying like collision deformer. And then we can't even extract. You see the point that I have is we're not getting directional information from this. What we'd want is like, oh, this line stretched, and based on that stretch, we're getting a map based on its stretching direction. But instead, we can get a stretching vertex map, and that stretching vertex map can tell us that, hey, this is stretched or not, but it doesn't give us any directional information whatsoever. And I mean, it's worth. I mean, I guess in some ways it's not worth it because I can think of easier ways of doing it. But it's cool to get that tension information out of it. If we take let's stop deforming it. If we add on, and we're going to have to make it editable. That's fine. I'll make a copy of it. Why not? If we make this editable and we add a vertex map, actually we can add the tags automatically. Right click. Cinema 4D character tags, tension tag. We can add a fold and stretch map. We only need a stretch because that's all we're doing. So we make a stretch map. There it is. It's applied. And now as I turn on our displacers, actually let me turn those off. And we fix our tension here. So that's like the default state. And now if we turn on our displacer, you see that our displacer is displacing, but our tension tag is now translating to say, hey, it's been made. It's been like this point to that point, it's stretched. So we get that distance information. So even if I deselect here, you're going to see that, oh, look, if it pokes out now, we get a vertex tag based off of it. Now, of course, we can just generate a vertex tag directly with a material now. So this would be like a redundant step in that process. But it's cool that we can do that. But once again, this is just an overall stretch. There's no direction to it. Like this normal isn't saying like, oh, I moved this distance in this direction from the object I had on there. So there just isn't a combination I can think of. So I think we sort of dead end here, unfortunately. You still get these cool layouts and get all the stuff looking really nice. I mean, I've talked about this stuff way back in the day on like the guts tutorial. You get these inflations from it. Without all the polygons, it's not going to look nearly as good. But you can get these inflations here, and if you were to apply your material, and the material is based off of our vertex tag. So we go to Effects, Vertex Map. And that should be all we really have to do, and hit Render. Maybe it has to be in the object. Oh, we have to tell which vertex tag. Whoops. Brink. There we go. So now you see it's colorizing based on those, and you can make it so that when something stretches, it becomes more shiny or less shiny and things like that. But without that ever intriguing streaking, that stuff's been in my head a lot lately, and the idea of like even stretching a noise, I would really love to do that. Imagine if you could project a noise along a spline. Like that would be so powerful. That'd be so amazing. You could have like surfaces that made a direction of noise travel along it. That'd be so cool. And yeah, doesn't work right now. But it's in the back of my mind. We'll give that a quick save in case anybody wants to tinker with it. By the way, if you didn't already know, if you support on Patreon, then you would get access to these scene files. I put them up every week after the show. Stretching. Back to the links. September. Or I guess it might not be September. It might be September. I'm not sure. It's kind of a leet speak name. Let's go ahead and click on this Instagram link and see what we got. Ooh. It's an animation? No, it's a still, but that's crazy. That's cool. Who made this? Okay. Zawasi? I'm not sure, but that's what I'm going to go with. Zawasi. And the title is Wingdings. So we've got a... Ooh, man. This is very... Somebody even said it in the comments. It's very Mandelbrot. This feels very procedural, like a network of things going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. As it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker, thinner, thinner, thinner. And yeah, it just goes further and further. It's so crazy. So I do like that. But I think I have some ideas of ways to, yeah, fractal fun. Honestly, I've never done anything with fractals. I barely kind of understand the concept. It's just not something I've engaged with. But we can make something I think akin to this with X particles. So let's go ahead and tinker with that a little bit. Let's go ahead and set up in the next one, actually, do they have, not system sort, quick tools, do they have a trails branches? Nice. So instead of us having to make this from scratch, this is a really, really quick setup, so now I didn't have to go and make all those things manually. So in the new X particles, you get that little shortcut. So this is really straightforward. You got your emitter. It's based off a defined emission of a single point, so that by itself is cool already. Instead of making an emitter of one, they just made a defined emission. The trails are just tracing it, so that's got nothing, that just is tracing. And then we have our XP branch and the sub branches. So now all I have to do is pop these open and start tinkering away, honestly. So let's see, what do we got? We want the first branch, the max distance should be, let's make it pretty short. So I'm going to say like 50. So that should travel. Blending mode, that's all fine. Deviation, honestly, let's even go easy on that. So no deviation on the first layer. XP branch number 2, its max length is going to be, I'm going to have these be relatively short. Let's say 15. 15. Blend in, deviation, that seems fine. Let's turn off that branch for a second. Let's see what we get. This should be a lot straighter. Yeah, cool. So now that's happening. The first one doesn't live for that long, so then those go. But that's kind of what I want. In fact, I would kind of like a lot of uniformity here. So variation, number of branches. Really, here's what I really want. I want branches from the tip. And I want, yeah, that's what I want. I want branch in. I don't know. I've never found a setting for this. Like, when is it going to branch in? I'm going to say I want to branch in at this cartoonishly huge number, which essentially just means only branch in when I die. Branch in, never. Branch from tip. When it gets to the end, I want it to split into 4 branches. When it gets to this end, I want it to split into 4 branches. Does that work? Yeah, boom, it hits the end, 4 branches. And there could be some wiggle in there, but let's keep that simple. So now I'm going to just duplicate that one branch to become another sub branch. Boom, boom. So now it explodes from 4 to 4. And then we could keep on saying, I want another 4 and another 4. And that's going to break and a break and a break. And we're going to get a cascading effect, which is cool. I'm going to go ahead and add a wind to the system. Or I guess a gravity would work. XP gravity, but we're going to make the gravity be negative. So it's going to travel upward. Maybe not quite that much. And yeah, there we go. That's pretty good. So let's go and tweak. Ooh, this one didn't go as a sub branch. So we split, and we split, and we split, and we split. So that's all good. And then I think I want more branch deviation. So I'm going to grab all of these. I'm going to say, where does that come in? Actually, we can't grab the last one. That always bugs me. Yeah, here, I'm going to say it has to be at least 30 degrees out. And then we can copy that one again. So they should shoot outward a little bit more. It looks like 30 degrees is not that much. Let's say, honestly, the way we're splitting, we can go quite a bit. Let's say 75, 75. There we go. I like that more. And let's even put in a couple more. Why not? So now split, 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 split. Now, the one thing that, yeah, that's working well. We need a few more frames. I like this mechanical kind of look. The one thing I'd like to do is make it so that they're living shorter the longer they go. I was trying to think if there's some math I could type in, and you can. You take num. Yeah, it gets confusing. What I want to do is say that like this one's based off distance and not life because it's not set to time. So here, what did we set that one to? 15? Yeah, so now they're all 15. 15, 15. And if we wanted them to all be the same, and we can't select them all because they're not the same object, but I can grab that one. We could type in, what is the equation? Num would just be the index, but it's the opposite of that. So we want to say minus num. So what do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So we'd say 6 minus num times 2. 6 minus num times 2. Let's see what that gives us. Oh, okay. Well, sort of worked, but you see it got really, really, really tiny. So let's try that again. So we'll do, I still think it's 6, let's parentheses, 6 minus num times 10. I'm going to copy that and paste it in here as well. And let's see what that gives us. So that's going to go from 6 to 1 to 1. Oh, that gets way tiny. Yeah, once I go minus num, it always throws me way off because we just type in num, and this should go 1, 2, 3. That's interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Did I miss the first one? Sorry, I just want to confirm that. Num and num. 1. Oh, there is no 0, so I tried to do 0. Oh, important thing to keep in mind, actually. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say 10. Let's do parentheses. 10 minus num parentheses times 10. Let's try that. So now what do we get? We get 100, 90, 80, 70, 60. So, okay, that's kind of working. So, boom, boom, boom. That's a nice long one. Shorter. Shorter. I guess they're all pretty long. But that worked pretty well. But now we can just go here and say x minus 40, x minus 40. And now it should subtract and subtract. And now everything should be shorter. I must have done something wrong. Because these two numbers are different. I don't want variation. Did I not say x minus 40? I must have misclicked somewhere where it didn't like it. But I went too far and it zeroed out a bunch of them. Dang it. Dang it. It's trickier than I want it to be. I knew there was a danger of doing that math right away. These are all seem weird. I'm going to paste the equation that I still have in and make sure it's working. Yeah, cool. Now those are all in there. And actually, they don't get that long. So let's just grab them all and say x times 0.5. There we go. X times 0.5. That works. There we go. There we go. Should be identical variation. Split, 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 split. Those don't look identical to me. What? Did I mistype when I said x times 0.5? Or I know what I was doing. I know what I was doing. The max can't go below the minimum, so I should have been doing all the equations on the minimum first and then the maximum. So that was my fault. That was behaving logically. There. Now they have the same max and min, which means these should be pretty much identical. Yeah, we get this very clean tree layout, which is cool. I'm going to say x plus 5, x plus 5. Just make everything a little longer. I know we're spending extra time on that, but getting the basis of this working well, I think, is a good idea. Now we can keep on splitting it more and more. I'm actually going to grab this last one and make it live for a while. Let's say 55, 55. So those last ones will be really long, but I'm just going to let those overshoot. So those are going to way overshoot. Okay, we probably shouldn't have let them overshoot that much. But the point being is now we've got this overall structure. So now my thought is if we were to take our XP trail, which is ready to rock, and add in a generator, and we will add in a, where is it? Skinner, I think it's XP spline mesher that I want. Are we really huge, or is it not? Do we make it a child? Boom. There we go. All right, sorry. Okay, so we do that, and now we can set a size. I'm going to set the size real big, like 50, so it should be cartoonish. But then I'm going to say, and let's turn off joints. We don't need that. But we're going to say that each sub-branch's scale is way down. Do sub-branches only work if we join them? Ew. Is that true? Do sub-branches only work if we join them? One moment here. What did I just do? Reset that number. Okay, so that is doing that. There are joints, so these are being connected somehow. I'm going to turn on caps. So those are connected. Now, if I tell it to start shrinking each branch, well, why did it do that? Why when I drop the sub branch a tiny amount, is it just being like, nope, broken? Why is it behaving that way, everybody? Yeah, I mean, we kind of need the spline mesher because it's the only thing that's going to give us the proper thickness for what I want to do. Although that's not necessarily true. I think it's mostly true, but not necessarily true, because volumes enable us to do some crazy things we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Now, my only worry is that this gets a little hairy. Those get really long in the end, so I'm going to regrow it. These only have to be 20 long. That should chill it out a little bit. That's good enough. So the thought is I know XP has a volume, but it doesn't do anything more than the cinema one. I'm more familiar with the cinema one, so I'm going to make a volume builder. We're going to feed the volume builder this. So now I'm going to set the volume builder to be a higher resolution. It's probably going to need to be significantly higher, so I'm going to say 2. And now we got to tell this spline object that it has a smaller radius and a way higher density. So there we go. Now I want this to be high enough where these really aren't colliding with each other. It's not something I'm super worried about, but it's got to be a little bit. Essentially, we want the one that's going to eventually be the smallest to be small enough that it is proper. And we can make the other ones bigger after the fact, I hope. I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure. Okay, cool. Now, the first thing I want to try is we have these reshape layers and everything, but we can also, I think, add them on as a separate object. So if we go to volume, we can create a reshape filter. Yes. So can we drop that in? Is that doing something? Click on the reshape filter, mode, erode, offset. Let's do something pretty high. Is it doing something? I'm getting a little worried because you see my mouse. I don't know if you're going to see, but like the mouse is really struggling to keep up with these changes. So that's scaring me a little bit, gotta tell you. Whoa! Okay, it was doing a big old calculation there, but it did work. A little worrisome on how long it took, but that's fine. Now, though, here's my thought is, let's save it because I'm feeling confident that we're close to crashing. I don't know what to call this one. Volume, I don't even know. Volume tree. Okay, now, with using this shape filter, you know what we should do is we should make this a lot lower resolution so that, oh, that's not going to work. I guess 2 should work, but now it's going to have to recalculate the whole thing. But this, now that we have this reshape filter being an external object, we can actually feed it a field. So I'm going to go and make a linear field. I'm going to set this to Y+. And we want this to stretch along the entire structure from top to bottom. Now, we couldn't have done this if we had the internal version of this object, which is why we did it this way. Let's go ahead and make it a little bit taller. Actually, honestly, we just would want to cut off here, so a lot of that stuff is redundant up there. But there we go. That's pretty much what I want. So I don't know if I had this going the right direction or not, but the hope is when I turn this on, we're going to see it. Yeah, there we go. Look, it's getting thinner or thicker based on the fall off, which is awesome. I've actually never done this, so that's cool. But of course, it's backwards, so let's set it to Y-. And now that should be nice and fat down there, and it gets thinner as we go up. So look at this awesome structure that we're getting. So if we were to grab our volume measure and increase our voxel or decrease our voxel size, which increases our mesh, this should subdivide significantly more. And then we can get our final blobby mesh from that. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab our mesher right away. I don't think we want to keep this parametric any longer than we have to because it's really chugging. So I'm going to let that pop in. We're going to make it editable and then turn off the hierarchy. So even now, hopefully we don't drop too much. But yeah, right. I've clicked on the volume mesher, and I just have to wait for Cinema 4D to catch up, actually create that mesh, and then allow me to, it'll automatically select that when it's done the calculation. At least it should. So, and right now you can see down here, it does say calculating the volume filter. So we are feeding it a cartoonish amount because of how thin we got. So there we go. That has seemingly finished. Now I can make it editable. Even though it's also a little frustrating. It doesn't cache it when it got made. I mean, it probably would make everything take longer. But now that I say it said make editable, it has to essentially do the entire calculation again. Okay, what I would love to do is bring that hierarchy back so that we have that to work from. Although we still have our shape field, so that's fine. I would like to keep it parametric, but I don't want to wait all that time. Now you see we've baked this down. You can see our mesh count is crazy, but Cinema 4D does not mind a high poly object like this. Although if we feed it certain things, it could choke a little bit. I do want to see if we can smooth it out a little bit. And yeah, the smoothing, you see that's one object. Cinema's like, whatever, I can handle that. Mostly, I just accidentally dragged the polygon. Now, and I'd probably even be inclined, even if it's just for fun, to make a displacer and then put the displacer on it. And this displacer, we could, let's go and displace it by using some, I think I'll just do some noise. And that's gonna look, that's fun looking. I already like that. Like, look at that. Like, if you asked me how to make that, I'd be like, I'm not even sure how I do it. And that's pretty cool looking. I like that. But that's not specifically what we're going for. So, although maybe we'll leave an element of that. But what I do want to do is make our relative scale here infinite. So I'm going to say 0 and 0 on X and Z. And now we should get a perfect stripe traveling straight horizontally through our entire structure. So once again, looks pretty cool. And now, yeah, now we got that infinite kind of thing going on. And I'd probably make my displacer be significantly stronger. So let's push by like 55. So it's going to blob out and be super crazy. But where we go with this is we're going to make another linear field. In fact, we've already got one, so why don't we copy and paste that other one, make it a child of our displacer, and feed it into the displacer. And now it should apply, and I can see that this being applied in a big way in the base, and then not at all on the end, which is, again, cool. And right now it's set to intensity centered, but I'm going to say just plain old intensity, so it should inflate out and not in. So now you can see we get all these cool stripes here, and they travel inward, getting more and more chill as they go. And let's go ahead and stretch this out a little bit more. It's taking too long to drag, so I'm going to type in a manual number. There we go, now it's stretching out even more. You got all these stripes, and now we have complete control over how those look by going into our noise scale here, and we can increase the scale and make this double, and now you see it's going to be chilling those out a little bit more. I think it looks cool. Some of these, yeah, it's really interesting how it's applying those. So yeah, so we get that overall shape. I don't even know if we need that smoothing. I'm going to turn it off. Yeah, you're going to see it's a little bit more wrinkled, but if we put the displacement before the smoothing might actually, yeah, it's going to, well, it helps a little bit. So anyway, that was just a cool way of getting kind of these more interesting looking lump structures in there. And honestly, I don't know how well it's going to work. And that gives us that nice randomness. And honestly, I did really like the way that those overall lumps, the random lumps look. So I'm going to drop in another displacer. I'm going to turn that off. Let's go back into our noise and give it another 100 scale. And we'll put that back down to 100. And I'm going to put this back to intensity centered, so they shrink in and out. Now we're going to get all that madness, but now we can chill it out a lot and just let those extra variations sneak their way through in various parts. So there we go. And that's looking good. We could do more and deform the top so it gets thicker. In our case, I could also probably just grab a taper. I'm going to put a taper in after everything that's happened. And let's move it downward. Okay, starting to get enough meshes here where it's starting to be like, all right, now I'm doing a lot. Let's give it a strength of, I don't know, 50%. Oh, let's flip that around and go negative 50. And like I said, flipping around 180. Actually, I think that just spins it. Let's do that one, 180. There we go, flipped it up. So now we can say negative 150. And yeah, now you can just see I'm making the stump thicker. So yeah, to whatever degree we want to kind of thicken that up, we can do that. That's all I was getting at. So now we get this crazy thing, which is pretty cool looking, like it's a crazy structure. What I would be inclined to do is current state to object this thing. So we could say current state to object. It's going to bake out a final mesh. Let's go ahead and we already were saving this. I'm going to save it as volume tree B. Actually, let's delete that one. And then save it as volume tree B. 3B volume tree. And then we can delete the original mesh, paste in this one. I'm trying to think if we have any need for any of these things. I really don't think we do. So we're going to get rid of everything. Now we get this mesh. Now, what I would do here, which we'll save immediately because we're about to put in another volume, is like the volume workflow that we now have in Cinema does kind of fundamentally change the way I think about a lot of things, because then we got this mesh and we got all these lumps that are overlapping and all these weird wrinkles. But if I feed this back into a volume builder and then we even lower the mesh a little bit, it's not going to give us back the same resolution we were just having. But by putting that to another builder and another mesher, even those places where it was overlapping, it's just going to kind of clean those up. And it's like, okay, whatever, you overlapped. Now, if we wanted this to be just as accurate, we'd have to drop this all the way back down to 2 or even 1. I don't think it's worth going that far. I'm going to say 2. Yeah, so we could stop there. And now you see we're still getting the overall effect pretty well. And we could crank up the adaptive, which should clean up our poly count significantly, depending on what we're going to do with it. Sometimes I don't like doing that because if we leave it down, it's all quads. This is crazy looking, but it's all quads. If we start doing this, we will have a significantly less dense mesh, but it will be at the cost of not having an even poly count. So if we're going to do sub-poly displacements or those kind of things, you wouldn't want to do it. I don't think we're going to, so I'm going to go ahead and let the adaptive range be pretty strong. And because we're doing adaptive range, I'm going to go ahead and drop this voxel size back down to 1, which is going to crank up the resolution, but then it's going to re-reduce it again. So there we go. This should reinstate a lot of our blobs down here to be just as accurate as they were. So we've got a newer, cleaner, well, I don't want to say cleaner, but we got a lower poly mesh now. Make that editable, so we got this new finalized mesh, which should be significantly quicker than what we had before. And there's no overlapping. But you will get some of these little inconsistencies where there's like little pinches and whatnot. So yeah, it's kind of a judgment call you got to do. And we could always grab the smoothing and smooth out things a bit. But once you've got those triangles in there, it just doesn't look as good. So it depends on what you're going for. But in any case, a lot of it at this point would just go to getting a good angle here. So I'm thinking something a little bit more stretched out. Something kind of like that, maybe even tilting it more. Kind of want to fake the angle more, but let's kind of want to do, like, twist my camera a little bit so it's a little sideways. Do something like this. I'd like to see more of that base, but we may end up making it so fat. Oh, there we go. That's better. Twisting a little more. Looks kind of gross, but it's neat. Yeah, do something like that. Honestly, we should merge it with the floor as well. That would have been a good idea. I don't even think it's necessarily a problem. If you wanted to do the basic version of this, I could make a landscape. And let's pull the landscape down on Y. Zoom. Like that. Let's make sure it's big enough to capture the entire screen. And I'm going to turn off borders at sea level. We could crank up our polygon count to be double. Let's make it a lot taller so we can get more distinct ridges. And then we would just, I want to make a camera. And now I can escape this position. And wow, okay. The landscape I made was a little more intense than I thought it would be. But that's cool. So I would want to move it up until the tentacles kind of hit. But then we're going to lose a lot of it, so it kind of goes to, do we have a seed? Yeah, there's a seed, so we can keep clicking through until we got a good-looking seed. This is going to be fairly challenging, to tell you the truth, because of... Are we upside down? We are upside down. Oh, interesting. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on that, because where I want to, let's just do this last part. The last part is fun, which is, and we've done it before in various ways. It is, and usually it would be cool to just go and find some sort of image. We did this super old school. In fact, Nick and I did one of these a really, really, really long time ago, where we would grab something like an image. We could just go to Google image search, and I'm just going to search for Neon City, and let's go to images, and let's go to setting, tools, let's go to usage rights, labeled for reuse with modification. We don't need much. Hey, look at CityKit. So I just want something that's kind of crazy looking with a lot of detail. Yeah, look at that one. So we don't even need much. I'm going to copy that image, and let's go into Photoshop. So we got Photoshop, and we'd open up a new file, and you can see it should have the dimensions of my image. But I'm going to say that I want the height to be 1 pixel, and where is? Oh, there it is. That's not working so well. I'm going to go new. Let's just do new again. We'll crop it. So I'm going to say paste. So we got this image, and I think actually vertically it looks a little bit more interesting. So I would take that and stretch it maybe. And then, oops, I forgot Photoshop has inverted the way it, if you hold down shift, it behaves opposite. So we want to find a really nice cross section here of pixels. Honestly, it's pretty hard to tell. Shift. Yeah, something like that. And then now we could probably just grab a sliver from here. So even if I were to just say C for crop, let's crop way in like that, way in like that. We could have just done this with noises, but I thought this would be kind of interesting. Now, even though we're not, this is fine. I'm going to go ahead and save that, in fact. It's not as fully stretched as we could make it. I'm just going to save it as a JPEG, episode 11. scene files, and we'll make a texture folder. Neon. And okay, that's a weird one. Let's go into cinema, and we've got our new material here. Let's go into our, yeah, we can go into the color channel, and let's load in scene file texture. I didn't finish saving it from Photoshop. That's a pain, but scene file texture. Okay, now where is it? Come on, Photoshop. Save it for me. Save, texture, JPEG. I don't know what I did wrong. I misclicked on a folder or renamed it something I shouldn't have, or something. But now it should be saved. There it is. Open up. What search path? This should be in the right search path. No, don't. Well, then this can be broken for other people, so let's load it in again. That's weird. Whatever. Let's put these into a null. I'm going to make a null, so it's a 0, 0, 0. Drop that in. Let's apply it. And now, okay, that's going to look weird and kind of funky, which is cool. But I'm going to set this to a flat projection. Whoa, that's cool already. Let's go to our camera view. And now we've got our flat projection. If we go to our texture mode, we can go ahead and rotate this. 90 degrees. That already looks cooler than I thought it would. So now, look at all these cool stripes we're getting. So now if we just hit T for scale and start scaling it down, then we should get more or less stripes. And you can see them traveling. Now, first of all, if you want to make an animation, you could just start recording. You can see as I'm scaling, we're actually scaling this number here. So if you recorded those, we could animate that to be doing this. So that's already kind of cool. But in any case, we get this. First of all, we shouldn't judge this yet because we want to go to editor and then display the texture preview size as no scaling. So now this is actually the sharpness of the image that we're feeding in. We probably would want to feed the image we are feeding in or stretch it out more, because right now you see we're getting some horizontal information, and if we want that, that's cool. If we don't want that, then we would want to, I didn't mess up my camera, did I? Nope. We would want to make sure that we stretch, I think it's going to be on the green one. So I stretch this, we're actually stretching the material, and now the stripes are becoming more consistent. So you can see as we're smaller, we have lots more information. As I stretch, it's becoming more of a uniform color all the way across. So it's almost like a single pixel is determining the color all the way through, which in this case does look cool. So, let's go ahead and make this a little more interesting. If we take this neon and feed it into the luminance channel, and let's not worry about reflection yet. In the luminance channel, let's go ahead and throw this into a filter. And I don't want everything to be luminant. Inside the filter, if you didn't know, then we can actually go down here to gradient curves, and I can turn that on, and we actually have like the curves adjustment in Photoshop. We have that here in Cinema. So I'm going to grab it, and here's how dark it is. So I'm going to really crank the darkness up. And let's curve that down. And now only certain stripes, only the brightest of the stripes are going to be what gets bright. But keep in mind, actually, I didn't even think about this, but if we make this linear, we could go and start randomly pulling in brightness in various places. So it wouldn't actually necessarily have to be like those, oh, the brightest parts on the image are the brightest ones that glow. We could do something like that, which could be kind of crazy and colorful. So let's go ahead to this point of view and hit render. So now we get all the colors, and we're getting these really, really crazy colors going on. So that's pretty cool. I would be inclined to do several other layers on this where you could go and put this into the bump channel as well. Let's put that same neon image into the bump. Just let that have a little bit of curvature where those are happening. It's not going to be super smooth, so I almost want to embrace a something bumpy on this. So if we were to put this into a layer shader and then make a noise, and then make sure that the noise is set to a world setting, and then change that to, I'm going to use another Naki. We use that all the time, but I am not going to complain. So if we do something like that, I want to turn up the luminance and in fact even the color for a second. So we can just take a look at our bump. There we go. So you can actually see how your bump is applying. And ooh, it's funny because our bump is inverted on this bottom one, which is not what I want. I'm gonna make it editable. Select it, hit UR, and now it's inverted. So now the bump should look better down there. Yeah, so the bump is better. And then we could make our bump pretty strong. Yep, I like that. Gets a little messy. Let's lower our delta, which just makes bumps look more detailed depending on the distance. This is also going to make them weaker, but that's going to pull that down. And my main point here being is I want to embrace a messier structure because our polygons aren't smooth enough to justify it any other way. And if we wanted to emphasize the horizontal nature, we could start stretching our bump a little bit horizontally, which would be making our X and Z bigger. So you see we start getting a little bit more of a stripey vibe, and the bigger we make those, the more apparent those horizontal stripes should be, but they won't be as perfect. So I'll make that a little weaker. So we do that, and now we can reintroduce our color back in again. And let's reintroduce our luminance back in again. And then I think I'd probably want to go to my reflectance and add a nice shiny layer. So we need an HDR probably. Actually, just to double emphasize this, let's make a sky. And this will be, I'm going to duplicate our material. And let's only worry about the luminance channel. We'll call this one sky. And inside the luminance, we could do something like hue shift it. Yeah, get some more colors in there. I'm fine with everything being mapped the way it is because we're just going to throw this onto the sky. And I'm curious how that's mapping, so let's just make a sphere. I'm going to put that on there. Let's just see. Okay, you see how it's stretching? So I'm actually going to make the sky a child of the sphere, and let's rotate it on X, it looks like. And we'll rotate that 90 degrees, and now we get horizontal. Although vertical might be a good idea. I didn't even think about that, but vertical might be better. Okay, let's leave that on the sky. We don't need the sphere. Now we got something to reflect, so now we can go back into our crazy kind of fractally structure. And let's go to reflection. Let's add a GGX, which should be super shiny, but we'll add a really nice dielectric Fresnel. Let's say ethanol, nice oily one. And probably a good idea to turn on physical, but let's just see what standard is giving us here. Yep, definitely have some reflection going on. Our bump might start fighting us on that. I'm going to turn off our bump temporarily. Yeah, we're going to get these little pinches and whatnot, which is what I was kind of fighting with the bump. Yeah, you see how this is disrupting the messed up nature of that. But that's fine. I'd also probably want to go here to our luminance and multiply our overall image by like 300%. So our reflections can be extra bright. And yeah, now we're layering up some extra static and reflections. And depending on what we do with our bump is going to highly determine the way that these are being mapped out. Looks a little messy depending on what you're going for. Let's go ahead and add in some, I guess it'd probably be a good idea to go to physical. And we don't need GI. We really just need that from the reflection. I do like turning on progressive so that it just will layer them up more and more and more. So it makes it pretty straightforward. Let's add an ambient occlusion. And our scale is, actually that's not true. Our sphere was pretty small. Yeah, that's a huge sphere. So this maximum length of 100 is significant. Yeah, so there we go. That just by adding in that, we're adding in all the darker areas inside of here. And that's already looking pretty cool. Yeah, look at all this crazy structure and whatnot. It's not bad. Yeah, that's cool. So it's, and I'm on progressive, so it's just going to run again and again and again and again. So we'll keep that in mind. Now, we picked our camera angle, and then we started doing the stuff in the background. I probably would have loved to have thrown this background into the same volume and blobbed it this straight into that mesh, so they'd be kind of continuing into each other. And if we were continuing this, I'd probably be inclined to duplicate our volume mesher, and let's move it so like we can have an unrelated copy of it somewhere else. Come on, it's really hard to move at this camera angle. I guess we'll go here. Actually, if we go to both, it should be easier. There we go. We can do something like that. We can get a little more structure over there. Let's make another one. I mean, if we didn't want to make a bunch of data here, actually, it would be a good idea is to make an instance of it and relink that one. And now I can just make instances of this object. And because we're never seeing that same part to extreme, I'm not worried about seeing repetition in those specifically. But of course, we can scale and rotate and do tons of things in order to get less repetition if we were inclined to. Really hard to move this around. There we go. On that one, I want to scale it, but you can't scale an instance in model mode. You have to do it in object mode. What are we doing? Okay, bigger, bigger, bigger. Nice. I can pull up. Nice. Move. Nice. Cool. All right, so now we've got a little bit more craziness going on. So, get another save. Let's see what this is rendering like. Yeah, that's weird and cool. I like the stripes. I think our original image, this would probably start looking a lot cleaner if we go into Photoshop. And we've got our image here. In fact, I'm going to say image. Let's go to image size. I'm going to. It's pretty big actually. So I'm going to go ahead and just blur it a little bit. Gaussian blur. I don't have to go too far. Like, in fact, I want to go very little, just a little something to take the edge off there. Save it. Save as JPEG. I'm just going to save over that. Back to Cinema. If we replace it once anywhere, it should replace all of them. I think. And with any luck, it's going to look a lot less grainy. I don't know if it actually will or not. Visually impossible to tell. Maybe if we let it render more. But yeah, we don't have to go too much further on this. I mean, it probably would be a good idea to do this in something in Redshift or something. But you know, the last thing I'll do is we could make something like an environment. And the environment, we can go and add on some sort of color. Let's go with a green. Well, green always looks kind of sickly. Let's make it more of a teal. So we can add in this. I'm going to turn on fog. I guess that's what I actually wanted was fog. Boop. And now we can set that distance to be shorter, even shorter still. Yeah, something like that. I mean, you would make it more or less intense inside of Photoshop, especially if you render it as a separate layer. Ooh, that's really strong. Actually, what I wouldn't even do it this way. I mean, okay, a little bit is fine. Like, do a little bit of fog. Let's go back to like 4,000. You do that, but then I've talked about this somewhat recently where you can make a light, and we can make this light and turn it into a no illumination visible light and make that our teal color. And if I change this shape, it's already omni, so we can go visible, and we've got our outer radius. So let's see what we can see. Yeah, there it is. It's that outer radius. So if I make this a lot skinnier, so let's make this down to, I don't know, 10. Now as we increase our radius, you see we're going to get just this stripe of visible color. So if I render on this, then we should get a, boom, distinct layer of fog. And then on top of that, we can go into noise. Now, first of all, if we made it volume, we could feed it some noises, which would be good. But for the sake of time, we could go and set the visibility here. Let's go ahead and set this to wavy turbulence. And if we set that down to 1, I always liked the way this kind of looked. Let's crank up our contrast, lower our brightness, something like that. So, and the scale is probably really tiny. So I shouldn't even wait. Let's just go ahead and make this 555, 555, 555. Render. In fact, we probably want to stretch that out now that I think about it. So 222, and we'll add a 1 in front of these nice big numbers. And hopefully we'll get some visible fog. Yeah, okay. Window a little big. Illumination scale. Let's make that 1/4 the size. Maybe those two don't correlate. I'm not entirely sure. Let's go back to 555. I just made it a little big. But adding that variation of fog so we can see through certain parts and not other parts, I think will go a long way. I mean, is the scale really that fickle? Maybe the original scale was not nearly as big as I thought it would be. Actually, that's fair because I keep forgetting that our sphere. There we go. So you can see it's a little more specific. Or if I bring in a sphere, the sphere is really small, so overall scene scale right now is really tiny. So there, I stretched out the light so you can see we can get these stripes going in a certain direction. And then, you know, this one might be a little bit bright, but then I could go and copy and paste it, and then let's move this one up into the air a little. Oops, up into the air a little bit more. It's pretty thick, so I'm going to go and make it half as thick. Let's shift the color a little bit more, even bluer. We can go into the noise. There is no seed. We do have a velocity. So there are, because we're not at the time of 0, actually, if we change our velocity, it's kind of like changing the seed because it's changing at different speeds at different times. That's some weird stuff, but and I have no idea that, you know, like different stripes, different blue, like different streaks coming through different points. So, you know, it can be cool. Divided by 2, 22. Okay, I should stop tinkering with this one because now we're just making a fun looking render. Although this will be a good thumbnail for the episode. So yeah, it just gets weird and fun. So if you guys have another question, get it in the chat again. And I will be moving on to another one in just a moment. Let's grab our brightness and lower that a little bit more. Lower brightness just means there'll be less visibility overall. Yeah, a little more stripey. It's still a little overwhelming. I think it's taking away from the overall environment. So we can lower both of those significantly. Because these just look so cool and sharp. And then, yeah, some depth of field on here. Slightly bigger reflections. If we hadn't made used all that adaptive to lower the poly count, then this would be looking a lot smoother. And even the way that these materials are applied. Right now we've got this one master material applied, but if we were to scale this down even further, we stretch it out really far, but if I take this and say 22, then look, we get so many more stripes. So yeah, we're going to get tinier streaks by making that smaller. More detail on these layers, but if we do the opposite, 222, they get really big. And now look at these more. This feels a little bit more candy like, and I do like it. Yeah, so just changing the scale on those, and then like just as a really cool animation. In fact, the viewport looks amazing here. If we were just on the material here, and I move this on Y, I think it's on Y. No, it's not Y. Z? No. Okay, it was X. Yeah, look at this. Like honestly, the viewport's looking almost as nice as the final render would. Not quite, but you know what I mean. But yeah, by animating this slowly down, like look how cool that is. So we get so much motion for free by this traveling down, and it just being like any given height level is a slice. And we kind of got these different layers of strata going. Whoa, it's trippy. Yeah, things get really cool. Like it would be really fun putting signal on here and using the BPM features to ooh, what did I do? Well, yeah, using the BPM feature so that it could be traveling down constantly, but like on the beat, it could be like and traveling more or less down. Like if we had a displacer in here that was like actively animating everything to be blobbing around a little bit, there's just a lot of fun stuff you could do. In any case, let's jump back to the chat and see what we got. Reference question number 2. Animated gradient lighting glow. Okay, that's intriguing. Let's see what that is. And then Jalf has an Xpresso question after that I'd like to take a look at. But let's see what this this gradient glow question is. 36 days of type. Oh, it's from Handel. It's not his name's not Handel. It's Handel. Handel. That's how you say his name. Handel. Yeah, he does really cool stuff. Zoom. You are specifically asking about the lighting from this. I gotta say, the thing that's throwing me off here is that there doesn't really seem to be a correlation between the color that's on the wall and the color that's getting reflected. So would this be a compositing thing where you would composite in what's on the floor separately from what you're seeing on the wall? I mean, because it, yeah, I don't know. My only other thought that I don't think is accurate, and I think it'd be really, really difficult to achieve, would be like if something could be reflecting something, and from our point of view, the reflection isn't very. How do I say this? If this wall was, I can't freeze it, but if this wall was catching a really strong HDR type of reflection, from our point of view, we wouldn't necessarily see that reflection, but the floor might see that reflection. I'm not even sure of a good way to test that. If we made a floor and we make a cylinder shape, and let's go ahead and make, I feel like this would be better in a third-party renderer, but I'm less familiar with, let's try Redshift, why not? The concept should be the same. Although I might be a little clunkier in it, and Redshift doesn't like floors. So if we make a Redshift material and we apply it to the tube, it's probably, I'm going to only make one material for now, but I'll probably split it into two in a second. But let's go ahead and pop open the Redshift material. I'm going to make, I almost don't want any, I'm going to do no color to start out with. We're going to do lots of reflection. We're going to make it a blurry reflection. And if we, yeah, I'm going to make, honestly, we'd probably be a good idea to start out with something like aluminum. Yeah, we'll start out with aluminum. And that's going to change it to GGX and all sorts of different anisotropic things and whatnot. So it's a nice blurry metal. So that's pretty good. So my thought is what if we make a cylinder, and I'm going to turn off the caps, and we're going to move this up into the air. We're going to give it a pretty big radius. Essentially, I'm going to leave it like this so we can see it, but imagine if it was really, really big. So now I'm going to make a material, and not a regular material. We're going to make a redshift material. I'm going to make an incandescent material. And we're going to wait a second and then plop that on there. And inside of there, let's go ahead and save this file. Oh, that's where neon ended up. Get in there, you silly. Oh, it's in both places. Replace it. Yay. Okay, so let's save this as number 4. Funky reflections. All right, and now my thought is if we go into the shader graph, let's go ahead and add in a texture, and the texture will be the image we just sourced. I'll grab the neon, and let's feed that into our color. So now that is that color. And it is luminant. We have a temperature and an intensity. Let's go ahead and multiply that by 2. So there we go, nice and luminant. And now let's go ahead and turn on our render view. So what do we got? If that is supposed to see the cylinder. Do we pull the cylinder up into the air? Or am I just way off here? I'm going to increase the intensity of that. It's going to get super bright, but that's because I'm going to pull it really far away. I guess, is it dependent on our angle? Yeah, I was worried that, I guess that's sort of showing it, but not really. Yeah, that's just blowing it out. I mean, you see here that the floor feels more blue than the object does, because if it's catching at a particular angle, like maybe this vertical part doesn't really see it, but the rest of it does. Maybe this would be better on a cone shape. So if I move this to the cone, and then we turn off the caps on the cone, and I tell the cone to be way bigger. There we go. Bigger radius, so we can just give that a little bit of height. So do something like that. Give it some inner radius. Chill out this outer radius. I'm really starting to doubt this would be the pursuits that Handel took to get where he is. But yeah, because this is such a vertical surface, it's not seeing this blue color, but this is a horizontal surface, so it is seeing the color. And if we had really strong colors, it could start seeing it reflecting. I'm really not thinking that that is the methodology used. I'm thinking more that it's just, I don't know. I'm curious. I don't know for sure. I have to think about it. Maybe I'll ask him, because it is a weird one, and it's cool. I want to go back to that Xpresso question. Jolf. Xpresso question. I recently made a drone that was flying around on a spline. I wanted to use its speed to animate the turbine. However, I haven't figured out how to get the speed out of an object. Yeah, it's just velocity. So yeah, this is definitely something we can do. It even goes to, yeah, you can calculate velocity pretty simply. It's, what's a good setup here to show it? Honestly, if we keep it simple, this is gonna be funny. I'm just gonna make a figure here, and we're gonna make the figure spin based on how fast he's moving. So there's the figure. I'm gonna have him pivot from about his torso. So let's go ahead and make a helix. I don't want a helix. Let's draw a spline. Pen tool. Okay, let's not be insane. Let's zoom back in. So let's go and drag out, drag out. We'll just give him a little bit of a 888. I don't even know if there's such a thing. Okay, cool. And we'll close it. And T for scan. No, here. R for rotate. I just want to smooth some of these out so it's not quite it's not too jerky. Okay, that works. And then, I mean, if we wanted to, we can, give it a little bit of verticality. Grow selection, pull down, grow selection, pull down, grow selection, pull up, grow selection, pull down. Okay, a little verticality on there. Cool. So now we're going to grab this null, and we're going to have it align the spline. This will be the spline. I'm not even going to worry about tangent. We'll just record the position. And I guess the important part here is we want it to be, let's give ourselves some more frames. We want it to travel from 0 to 100 at the end, but we want there to be some speed variation. Now it's already got some, what do you call it? It's already got some variation because it's a spline-based curve. It's smoothing it out, but I want to make it more extreme. So like this one, we'll have that go up more, and then we'll jump forward, and then we'll make that be less. So it's going to go really slow during that time. And then here it's going to jump up a bunch. 75, that's cool. And I'm going to jump over here. It's going to take a really long time for it to go on that part. Why don't we have it go here all the way up to about 96? And I'll scoot that back. So let's just see. We should see him traveling around. So slows down, and then it's going to go really fast. And then slow down. The basic idea here being is the faster he spin, or the more he's moving, the faster he should spin. That's the concept here. Let's go ahead and make him pop out from the background just a little bit more. All right, so what do we got to do? Well, we got to use Xpresso, obviously. So let's go ahead and grab the figure. Actually, I guess I'll put it right onto the null. So let's add an Xpresso tag to the null. And that's going to pop right open. So what do we got? We've got the null, and then we're going to have the figure. So we want to get the position, the global position out from this null. What we want to do is compare the distance traveled by it. So like how much distance has it traveled over the course of a frame? And essentially that's our velocity. So all we need to do is use the memory node. So I'm going to right click, Xpresso, General, Memory Node. And we're going to feed this into the input. Very important on the memory node, we have to set the history depth to 2 and set our history level to 1. That's just the default parameters. That makes things work. So what do we got now? This is now a node that is remembering previous refresh what it was fed. So, Intelligent Machine is saying velocity is a built-in port. Oh, yeah. Position velocity. Oh, well, that's boring. It used to be fun to do that math. Now we just get it for free. All right, well, okay, goodbye memory node. So we have position velocity, and now we can just feed that through a range mapper to get our relative speeds. So if we go to range mapper, I'm going to say, I mean, do we just say, yeah, we don't want the velocity to, well, I guess if it's 0, then it can be 0. So we'll just feed the velocity into the range mapper. And we'll grab the figure and spin him, which is going to be on P. So let's grab on figure, let's grab the, or is it H? Why is he H? Rotated. Oh, I was wrong. It was H. So let's grab H and drag that in. So we're going to connect our velocity to our, come on, rotation. And now so with our range mapper, we can go, we're outputting anywhere from 0 to 1, and it's mapping 0 to 1. But I can say my output range is degrees, which just makes that a lot clearer what's happening. And let's say that this is 0 to 100 will map to 0 to 360. Now, actually, now I think about it, is this going to make them spin one way, or it's going to spin one way or the other if it is how do I say it? This is going to make it spin forward and backwards depending how fast it's going. So that's not exactly what we want. But let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got. So if I play, it could be cartoonishly fast. You can see he's spinning really fast. But let's go ahead and chill it out. There's multiple ways to slow it down. I could say that the output upper is smaller. I'm going to increase our input upper. So it's like 1/10 the speed. So you can see when he's moving slowly, he's spinning, and he's spinning one way. If we speed him up, then he starts spinning the other way. It's still actually really fast. So it just goes to show how quickly we're moving. So I'm going to slow that down even more. So now as he moves, okay, well now that's so slow that it doesn't even look like he's spinning. So it's somewhere between those two. So let's do 2000. Zoom, zoom. And so as he accelerates, he's going to spin up, and as he decelerates, he's going to spin down. But what we want is something additive. We want an additive process. So what we would do, I think, yeah, this is where things get interesting, and you can get refresh issues. So we can, I don't know how far we want to go on this, but what we can do is say that I want to get the time. And I don't want time, I want the frame. So out of the time node, we'll get the actual frame. So actually, we don't even need time. All we have to do is say that I want the figure, and what do I want from the figure? I want his rotation. So I'm going to go to coordinates, rotation, H. So here's his H. And I'm going to say that I need a math node, Xpresso calculate math. I'm going to take his current rotation and add some number. Let's just say 1. And now we've added that, let's feed it out to his rotation. So all we're doing is taking his rotation, adding 1, outputting it. And that just means every single refresh is going to add 1. Now keep in mind, 1 is not 1 degree, 1 is 1 radian. So now he's spinning at a constant velocity all the time as long as you play forward in the timeline. So now what we need to do is maybe chill that out. We're going to add, we're saying we're adding 1. Let's say add 0.1. Let's see how slow we have to go until we see something, because this is pretty arbitrary. Okay, so you see by doing 0.1, it's slow enough that we can very easily visibly see it. So there we go. This is a very reasonable speed. So he's constantly moving at that speed. So now what we would do is, instead of just adding this 0.5, let's make another node here. And this one is going to be a multiply. So this is going to be a 1. I don't think we have to explain it that way, but we can multiply that by this range mapper. So something I actually, you can use a result node and whatnot, but I always just like doing this workflow. I'm not sure why. If I make a text object, I can drag the text in, and I can output. Actually, I'm going to take the velocity. I'm going to put in the text. I'm going to say output to the text field here. So we can now see the numbers that this is putting out. Now you see we have actually what's interesting here with our position velocity. Oh, that's interesting. It's a vector. That's actually bad, I think. We don't want to, we can feed it a vector. That's confusing to me. Yeah, we input a vector and output a vector, but that's not what we want. So I'm not sure if this position velocity is actually something we want. See, if this is the case, previous global matrix, previous position. If this is outputting a vector, then it's not giving me the consistent velocity that I wanted, and it could be doing something. The way it's mapping, it might not be accurate, actually. Because I really just want the change in distance traveled, and this is constantly a... I guess we could get a magnitude from this, because this is previous, or this position velocity. So all we need is a magnitude from here. So if, let's see, can we get a magnitude? Normal? How do we get a magnitude? I know how to do it in code. I'm not sure how to do it in Xpresso. I don't want to do code here. Distance. Oh, yeah. Somebody's saying that we probably have it as a system preset. Matrix. Possibly. Advanced. Nearest follow spline. Calculation. Oh, search system? Oh, you're just saying search normal. Yeah, I don't think there is a normalize, and I don't think there's a magnitude, honestly. Yeah, there's no, those aren't there. Vector transition. I think if we got the magnitude from here, but I don't remember how to get the magnitude. So that does make me want to go back to just calculating the distance. So we don't need to use the memory node, but what I would do is, let's get the, I don't know if this is that's a position velocity. I don't want that anymore, go away. So no more position velocity. What I will do is take previous position, and I'll take current position, and then what we do is we calculate the distance between the two, and then we have we no longer have a vector. So if we go to make a distance node, and now we can take the previous position and the current position, and now we get a single number. And if I put that in, you're now going to see that we don't have a vector, we have a very reasonable real number. So you can see this is traveling kind of like him as fastest goes about 200, and as slowest he goes 0. So that's a very straightforward number to range map. So we can throw this into the range mapper, and we know he's traveling from about, and I'm going to turn this off, vector. that's weird. I think that range mapper's dead. Range mapper. So if we put that in, we know he's traveling from anywhere from 0 to about 200. And now when we're outputting, we want it to go some proportion of a whole number. So remember, if we had him spinning at 0.5, it was a very good spin. So I'm going to go output this anywhere from 0 to 2, and that becomes a multiplier on our 0.5. So if we said that our number is supposed to be 0.5, we're going to multiply it by whatever this is outputting. Then now we can output this, and now we should be getting a very reasonable fraction. 0.5 multiplied by 2. Anywhere, if he's going really fast, it should output 2. But then it's going to be 0.5. Yeah, and 0.5 is times 2 of that. Okay, sorry. I just had to think through it. So now if we feed this range mapper to the multiply is just taking... The multiply is a way of making it very explicit that 0.5 is our goal number. We could have, and if we want to be extra explicit, we can make a constant. So we can make a constant variable here and say 0.5 is our magic number, and then feed this in. It just makes everything very explicit. We could just like erase out that 0.5 and go into the range mapper and make it half the value, and it just automatically becomes it. But I like the idea that 0.5 is this very explicit thing. We feed that into the math, and now it is constantly adding whatever the current kind of distance, which is, you know, how much distance was traveled between two frames, is being converted through the range mapper to be a reasonable number, which is then modifying our base speed to be either multiplied from 0 or be multiplied by 2. So we can go up to twice as fast as the base or 0 amount of the base. And then that's constantly adding to whatever the rotation used to be. So we can go ahead and take a look at both this number and his spin. He's not moving, it doesn't spin. He goes faster and he spins faster. He goes slower, he spins slower, but it's always moving forward. The spin is constantly moving only in one direction. Very, very important to distinguish that. Yeah, so that's actually working quite well. I'm fairly pleased with that output. We took a little bit of a longer path getting there. And you see, this is our base speed. So the idea of changing our base speed, if we go to our console, let's say he's spinning a little too slow all the time. So we could say that his base speed should be 1, so he's spinning twice as fast all the time. Very easy to change the number. Now he's spinning a lot, and then he slows down. And keep in mind, you also set a minimum speed you could be spinning via, we could set a minimum by adding another add in here, or we could go into our multiplier, into our range mapper, and right now we're saying we can go all the way down to 0. We say, you know what, you can never quite go down to 0. Maybe you can only go down to 0.1. So even when he's stopped, he's still spinning a little bit. So there's different ways of doing that. Personally, I kind of like the idea of like a floor, like a minimum being a separate add, so we can add on another variable here. And of course, with Xpresso, you could put these controls outside of Xpresso, but here I could just say, we're also going to add in this minimum speed of 0.5. So now he's always spinning at 0.5 no matter what, even when he's not moving, but when he's spinning fast, he goes even faster. Now, there's one last thing I want to talk about with this Xpresso, because we got a pretty clean setup going overall, and that is the idea of this resetting. Because right now, every time we play through, it is actually going to be a completely different animation, because his start position is going to be based on whatever his rotation already was. In fact, if I keep on hitting rewind, you're going to see he's going to keep moving. He is not static. He doesn't have this, he essentially doesn't have an initial condition. You know how in dynamics at the time of 0 always resets? But here we don't have a reset. There's nothing to reset it. So he's always based off of his current his current position and spin is based off his previous spin. So with that in mind, we need to give it a condition to reset. So I'm going to make a time node. So let's go ahead and make Xpresso general time, and I like using frame. So I'm going to say, let's give it a conditional. So I'm going to say, let's go to Xpresso logic and say compare. So I'm going to say if the frame is equal, right here, equal to 0. So right there, that's all we needed. The default values were fine. If the time is 0. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and make a condition. So I'm going to go back to logic and let's make a condition node. So now we got a switch. It's like a 1 or a 0, or a true or a false. And that's what we're outputting from this compare node, a true or false. Is it true that this statement is happening, or is it false that that statement is happening? So we're going to feed that through the switch. I always forget. I'm assuming that that's true and false, but I'm not 100% sure. So if it's true that it equals 0, then this should output a number. And that number should output, once again, let's make it explicit. I'm going to make another constant. It should output 0. So at the time of 0, it is spun 0. If it's not the time of 0, meaning all the other frames, it should be, and it should be whatever its rotation is. So it's just feeding its rotation straight through. And now we interject this node in between these two. So now we're not always just saying, hey, take whatever the figure's rotation is. Sometimes, the time when it's 0, it is actually 0. So that just means at the time of 0, we should reset every time. So let's go ahead and check that out. In fact, we're outputting. You can see outputting right now. Wait, did I output the right thing? Yeah, let's just output from our final. Well, the multiply is a good place to do it because right here we're adding a 0.5. But that means at the very beginning, it's going to get a 0.5 added. So we can keep in mind it shouldn't be 0 at the time of 0. It's going to be 0.5. Although it is 6001, which is probably making sense because the figure is going to have this cartoonish huge number. Because this isn't, it's a rotation thing. Visually, it's going to be identical. It's just that cinema doesn't, it's because of like Euler rotations and everything, where in a lot of ways, cinema doesn't care if you're at 0 or 360. That's the same thing. Now, in certain conditions, it does matter. In other ones, it doesn't. But if I take this number, even though, like if I try and tick this up one, you see it's going to be constantly, actually, it's, oh, he's still spinning, so I did something wrong. Output from this condition. Oh, it looks like I did it backwards. Apologies, so that should be there. That should be there. Now he's outputting 0. Hooray! Okay, so, and let's see if that 360 thing I said was true. Is true. No, it's not true in this condition. There's other conditions where it's true, but ignore what I was just about to say because it's not this condition. Okay, so the point being is if I try and spin him and rotate him, he can't. He is at the time of 0, and at the time of 0, he is rotated exactly 0.5, which in radians translates to 28.6 degrees. So if we go forward one frame, he is going to rotate. And so we can keep on going forward, and he's going to keep on rotating forward. But if I go back to time of 0, he goes right back to, if this is refreshing properly, which it isn't necessarily, going back time of 0, it's going to be 28. So now we should get the same animation every single time. Zoom. So there we go. Nice. That was a good Xpresso question, though. The making the velocities external was I didn't realize that, and previous position, which is really powerful. It allows you to extract a lot of stuff. I'm curious about how we would get the magnitude in a slightly different way, but it's fun. J. Marlman. Yes, the system eventually got kind of complex here, but if you think about, that's the thing with Xpresso. Xpresso always looks really impressive, but really all we did, I mean, it would be the same as being, you know, like if you put a cube inside of a cloner on clone onto a spline, it looks really impressive. There's a lot of data and information there. But if you look at step by step by step, it's not that crazy. So if you look at each of these different nodes and clusters, like, you know, you can think of this little series we did, pretty straightforward. It's just like, hey, what's the time here? Here's a switch. And then there's 2 inputs it can get. So that's actually not that crazy. And honestly, things look a lot more complex when they're disorganized. So if we spend a second and organize these all together a little bit better, then they're going to start looking not as complex. And it's always nice to put certain packages together that visually like lend to each other. But yeah, if you make like just as a fun example, and I haven't saved this yet, and get some more questions together. We have time for one more. Xpresso velocity spin. Just for fun, with this being saved, like, okay, this espresso, it's like, okay, that's clean. There's something going on, but it's clean. But if I were to take this and let's move these here and grab those and move them over here and then grab that, move it down here. Let's move this one over here, move that one over there. Like you can see just by organizing something in a slightly strange way. You see, by this being slightly disorganized, look at how much more complex it feels automatically. It's like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, I can't possibly follow this. It's like, no, I couldn't really follow it either, but let's revert to saved. And it's like, oh, actually, it's that. So cleaning up your Xpresso that way could also significantly help the way you think about it. There's also other ways of organizing things. I've said it before, but I like making it so that I always take external objects and I like colorizing them completely arbitrarily. When I have an object that's coming in from the object manager, I make them green. If I'm using a null, then I color them purple, and then I have various. If I write code, then I make them blue. It's just I have a little structure in mind, and that way it's really easy to tell. And then this one's also really important. The text object is pink. Text object is always pink because if you delete an object out from Xpresso, this is actually pretty interesting. If you delete I shouldn't have done that. I keep dropping windows below there, and then I can't get them back again. How do you actually? Is there anybody in the chat who can help me with this? It's driving me nuts. I just dragged my window, and it went down below my Windows bar, and now if I double-click Xpresso, I can't get it to pop up. If I go down here, I can see it's like, oh, I have an Xpresso window. But if I click the Xpresso window, it doesn't pop up anywhere, and the only way I've been able to fix this is by closing the Xpresso window and then reopening it brand new, because if I drag it down here, it's just gone. I cannot get it to pop back up again. How do I stop that? I don't know. Anyway, what I wanted to point out is if you break an object inside of Xpresso, you can break all of Xpresso. So if I were to delete this text object, he's not spinning anymore. Like, what? Why isn't he spinning? The text object had nothing to do with him spinning. Well, the text object had something to do with Xpresso, and I now have an undefined object inside of Xpresso. And because I do use this text object as this external object that I'm feeding in, but it's actually not part of the rig, I will often delete it. And when I delete it, I'm like, oh God, where's my text node? And I can't find it. So I make it bright pink. So like no matter where I am in my Xpresso node, I can be like, oh, there it is. Like there's my undefined text object that it couldn't find. So, and now we should be spinning again because it's whenever there's an undefined parameter, it doesn't have to be a missing object. It could be a missing parameter that you deleted. Let's see. Somebody's saying third icon from the left of the toolbar, press it. All right, so let's hide this. And you're saying third, this? Well, I mean, that's not helping because yes, okay, there is the window, but how do I bring it back up to the front? If I click it, it just is like, oh, okay, I maximized down below the window. You can right click the taskbar and cascade windows to get the hidden windows. That doesn't work there. You can pop that up. No, that didn't work. Nope, that didn't work. Nope. I just tried hitting Control and then Shift and then Alt. None of those worked. So yeah, I'm in full screen mode. I mean, yeah, that's in full screen mode. Click on that. But yeah, like I'm no longer in full screen mode, and now I'm clicking on Xpresso, and it's still hidden below the panel. Dink. Dink. So yeah, weirdness. I could select the Xpresso window and hit Windows left or right. All right, well, let's try that. Whoop. Do this and do that. It should be selected, and you're saying hit that. Okay, well, that did force it to pop up into a particular spot. By holding the Windows key and holding, I guess, up, down, left, or right, you're going to snap it to the up, down, left, or right of the screen. So at least that did pop it up. That's a little clunky. There's probably a better way to do it, but it did rescue the window. So thank you for that. Anyway, let's see if there's any more questions. Similar themed project. Conveniently, my first question. Okay, wait, is that two-part one? Here's a quick one. How would you make this cube with a lighter primitive edges? Okay. Or isn't lighting? Bonus question. Wait, I don't understand this. How would you make this cube the lighter primitive edges? Noticeably lighter. Bonus question. How do you make this background? So let's just click on this and see what we got. Ambient cube. Example for Chris. Oh, you made this for me to... Where did this come from? I'm confused. Where this came from. Because if you just made it, then you know how to make it. So, in any case, we can... There's several... And you said, how do you make the background as well? Yeah, the background is interesting. Actually, the background is pretty straightforward, is what I think it is. So, cube. Yeah, if we want to just highlight the edges somehow, first of all, a couple things. First of all, it's a cube, so there's several different ways of doing it. One quick way would just be we can make a gradient and set this to be a box gradient and invert that, and let's pinch up this black. Oops, I guess I didn't. Oops, apologies. I just wanted to pull the black up. Whoop. And now apply that to the cube. Boom, lighter edges. Pretty straightforward. You can just pull this and have whatever amount of edge or glow that you want to have be there on the edges. And, you know, put that in the luminance channel, make it slightly gray, whatever. You have complete control over the way that that's going to work. So pretty straightforward to do it with that. Now, not everything's going to be a cube. Let's try a bevel version. I don't know if this will work or not, but I'm not even sure if bevels create. I don't think bevels actually create selections like that. And you have to make it editable. I'm not even going to do it that way because I don't like it. Now, the next way, I'm going to apply this black material, and on that, we can go ahead and make a proximal. And now we can feed the proximal this cube. We might have to make it editable. I'm going to say use edges, and let's make the end distance smaller. Hit render. It doesn't show up. If I make this editable, then boom, proximal is now adding together. The blend mode is set to add, but if you set it to lighten, then this will perfectly blend. And the advantage of this mode is you can do it on other objects. So we could put it on a sphere, make the sphere editable, and drag the sphere in, hit render, and now it's going to outline all of those edges based on whatever this end distance is. That becomes the thickness, outlining your individual lines. So that automatically will trace your edges in a very nice way. Of course, you have to drag the object in. We have to make it editable, but we might not. I realized recently, and by recently I think I mean yesterday, that the correction deformer seems to work pretty well in that circumstance. So without making it parametric, if I drag in the correction deformer, it does see it now. If you just put in the cube, it doesn't like the cube. Nothing's there. But if we put the correction deformer in, it does, which is pretty crazy, honestly. So yeah, that's now parametric, which is cool. So yeah, I think that covers that. There's additional ways we could make it more subdivided and put some vertex tags on there. We could convert the edges to a spline. We could, let's see, what are some other ways? Well, I mean, you could paint it with body paint, a lot of different ways, but I think the two ways I just said are very quick ways you could do it. And now going to, and then, I mean, everything was luminant there, so everything just feeds into that same thing. So you would make this in the luminant channel instead, make the color one solid color, so it could just be a nice white color, for instance, and then we can go into our proximal, and now this is lightening it, so now you're gonna see we're gonna get this nice glow, but you could also increase our end distance and you could get more of a fall off. If I set this to smooth instead of lighten, it's always a nicer gradient falling off. And if you wanted to, this could be put into a filter, and then we could turn on this gradient range mapper, and then we could curve this down way sharper, I think. And now we should, yeah, now get a sharper glow on the edge, so you can really remap that, and so you can get this nice blown out color. So you get that more of a glow feel, I think. And yeah, it looks pretty good. A lot of different ways of tweaking that one if we wanted to. Now to the background. Maybe this will be a little bit of a disappointment. And do I have good GI settings? But my thought on that background actually is it's just a cube. They're just inside of another cube. And at that angle, this cube is illuminating it. So if this one was rotated and we turn on some sort of GI, so we'll turn on physical, and we'll turn on progressive, and then we'll add on some global illumination. And I never remember which ones are good settings, so let's do a QMC and light mapping. And it's probably going to take a while to calculate, but we have progressive turned on, so it should be fine. So now that's illuminating, and there is, in theory, GI bouncing around, but, well, I only need one bounce of it. So the only trick is I need to, well, first of all, let's make that white, so it's going to have a better chance of catching light. And now in this material, in Cinema, in Vanilla Cinema, we can pop open our GI material, and I can say, under illumination, I can say to generate GI, and I want it to generate 1,000 times its normal GI. So now as this renders and is progressive, so it's going to get better and better and better. But my thought is, depending on where our cube is, we're going to, and it seems like it's already emerging. It's really grainy still, but you see we're getting this little bit of a V shape here, because as it goes into the corner, that's going to be the fall off. Now, Vanilla Cinema isn't going to have the sharpest of GI processes here, so this would have been better if we did it in Redshift, but Redshift I don't think we'd use proximal, so that wouldn't work as well. But I think, yeah, as it's slowly refining, I did not put very good render settings in here. I think you're going to find that you get that kind of similar shape, and if we were to have colorized this, then we would be seeing a nice little color fall off on it as well. So hopefully that covers it. Let's see. Yeah, I think that kind of covers it. Fun episode, everybody. I really like that one colorful thing that we got to make with all the crazy tendrils going. You can't directly do fractals in Cinema, as far as I know. I don't. Maybe there's a fractal plugin I'm not familiar with, but there's a lot of fractal pieces of software, and a lot of fractal stuff is just like coming up with an equation that kind of feeds. One of the variables feeds back in on itself. There's a really, really great little mini YouTube documentary about the Mandelbrot series. The Mandelbrot, like, I don't know what you call it, Mandelbrot equation or algorithm or whatever it is, but it's really interesting. It kind of blew me away. Let's see if we can pull it up real quick, actually. What was this last one? Glow edges. Cool. Okay, that should wrap that up. Let me see if I can find that one video. Pop it open on YouTube. Mandelbrot. Number file. Yeah, here, this video. I'll link it. But yeah, this is it's like a 15-minute video where this guy goes over the Mandelbrot series and how it kind of gets calculated. And he does all these really great like mathematical breakdowns of doing calculations inside of it, and then the area and how stable something is. And eventually you start getting, as you increase the resolution, you start getting these kind of things. So that's kind of it is a fractal thing, but it's a very specific one. Here's a link to that if anybody's interested. Okay, so that should wrap this one up, everybody. Thanks so much for coming and hanging out. As always, I couldn't do it without everyone coming and hanging out and asking questions. It's really fun. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your support on Patreon. It's really been great. Hopefully, like I said, I want to make a more elaborate version of that Galaxy tutorial we did last week, because I think that'd make for a fun one. So I always overthink it, and I'll spend a lot of time because I'm kind of learning, but then I end up never making the tutorial where I'm like, oh, I learned this, and here's a trick, here's a dead end. But I could really just sit down and be like, and record, go, make a better version of it. So I got to figure that out. Thanks so much again, everybody, for hanging out. Quick shout out to our Great Wanderer Studios, who is our big Patreon sponsor. In fact, I have a second one, but he requested that his name not be put up, and he just wanted the support, which I super appreciate. And here's a special shout out just to you. In any case, thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out, and I will see you either tomorrow for the special bonus stream if you're on Patreon, or I'll see you next Wednesday for the next Rocket Lasso Live. So goodbye, everybody. Thanks again.